Howdy. I'm back. And I'm going to attempt at reviewing, I guess, a few more movies. Like I said in the last and first episode, I'm playing a lot of catch up, which is okay. I think all of the movies that I covered in the first episode were movies that I saw in the latter half of 2025. So now I'm going to be moving on to movies that have been released in 2026. Ultimately, I'll get to the point where I'm just covering one movie per week, one new release per week. And I might be peppering in some other movies that I watch throughout the week as well that may or may not have anything to do with the new release in question. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Whatever. So I'm just going to hop right into it so I don't ramble for forever like I did in episode 0.1, I'm calling. And the first movie I'm going to talk about today, the first movie I want to talk about today, is Bradley Cooper's new movie, Is This Thing On? This is Bradley Cooper's third movie as a director, I believe, after A Star Is Born, the remake, the fourth remake of that movie, and Maestro. Maestro, I unfortunately didn't have the ability to catch and haven't watched, but I have a basic grasp on the premise. So, Is This Thing On stars Will Arnett and Laura Dern, and let me read you the synopsis real quick. As their marriage unravels, Alex faces middle age and divorce, seeking new purpose in the New York comedy scene. Meanwhile, his wife Tess confronts sacrifices made for their family, forcing them to navigate co-parenting and identities. You will quickly understand kind of the tone of this movie just by watching the trailer. And if I'm being honest, it's very similar to the tone of Bradley Cooper's first movie. And from what I understand, maybe not similar tone of Maestro, but similar themes. And the theme is, the resonating theme or the through line of all of Bradley Cooper's movies seem to be kind of like a struggling artist or someone that just wants to be great. Someone who has to sacrifice their life in certain ways, whether it be their marriage or relationship or their actual own life in order to kind of achieve success. I watched Is This Thing On a few weeks ago at the beginning of January after it had a limited release. I think it finally got a wide release and I was able to catch it. And this movie's just fine, if I'm being honest. There were some touching moments. Will Arnett and Laura Dern are fun to watch on screen. I thought that they had some pretty good chemistry, especially for a recently divorced couple or a couple working through a divorce, I guess. A few things that were really touching in the movie was when Will Arnett stumbles into this comedy club and finds that he begins using the stand-up as essentially therapy. And it's just in his delivery, essentially, at the beginning, that people found it funny. So a lot of self-deprecating humor, a lot of negative self-talk. To put a positive spin on that I appreciated was when he eventually kind of burrows himself into this small up-and-coming New York comedy scene. You can really see the care that those people have for one another. And it kind of feels like I've got a snowplow outside my window. It doesn't feel like that, but that's what's happening. Oh, of course, he stopped right now and is having a conversation with someone. Excellent. They're still talking. It's been 30 seconds. Okay, he's finally turning around. Lost my train of thought. I believe I was saying that when Will Arnett gets into the small New York comedy scene, those were some of the more touching relationships throughout the movie, because you can tell that these people really, maybe not care might be too strong a word, but they really lift each other up in this small scene. And Will Arnett kind of finds solace where he had none previously. His conceit is that Laura Dern has walked away from their marriage, and because she walked away, he's now no longer present, and it's a double-edged sword kind of situation. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed Will Arnett's journey through this movie. Now on the flip side, Laura Dern, we learned that she has given up professional volleyball to start a family with Will Arnett, and it seems like you start to understand that she kind of has some resentment for that. I believe she was an Olympic athlete, so she was at the peak of her power as a athlete, and gave it up for Will and starting a family. So on the flip side of Will's journey, we have Laura's journey. She's a little too old to continue being a professional athlete, so she invests in coaching. What's really interesting about the plot of this movie, what happens in the plot of this movie, is that in order to not repair the marriage, I guess, but in order to find each other again, Will and Laura's characters have to essentially sneak around like they did in high school, around their other friends. So everyone knows that they're getting a divorce, and then they start to understand one another, and then they start sneaking around. And this is like the beginning of their healing journey. And part of the kind of whole premise around that is that I guess they start a family too early, and because Laura Dern's character was following this professional athlete journey, they never really had time to be kids. So now they are kind of reinvigorating their relationship through this kind of sneaking around and not telling each other that they're quote unquote back together, or not telling their friends that they're quote unquote back together. And it leads to some heated conversations. It leads to some kind of revelations in their relationship that ultimately, I guess you were to assume that they end up together at the end of the movie, which it's still kind of, I think it's still kind of up in the air. I don't think that they move back in together or anything like that. It's just like they can tolerate each other again. It's very interesting. There's one major flaw in this movie, and it's that there's the entire emotional resolution of this movie hinges on a specific song. And more specifically, I believe it plays in the trailers, Queen and David Bowie's Under Pressure. Here's my problem is this. This film feels like it wouldn't even work if that song was not the song that they chose for the movie. Because in the movie, their kids are practicing for a school, not a play, but like just a school band audition. And it's like a rock band too, which I've never seen before. It's like a 5-piece rock band comprised entirely of kids. And throughout the movie, their two kids are practicing playing Under Pressure on the bass guitar and the piano. And so we get to the final scene after they've made some revelations about their relationship. I think Will Arnett says something along the lines of, I was unhappy in our marriage. I was not unhappy with our marriage. And so this begins the healing process. And they attend this school play, school audition, school, whatever you want to call it. And as we kind of see Will Arnett and Laura Dern's characters recreating the magic in their eyes, being able to be kids again in a relationship while at essentially a school dance while their kids are playing this song, you're also being just bombarded with the lyrics of the song, which are, why can't we give love one more chance? And so on and so forth. And it just feels very on the nose. And it feels like Bradley Cooper. It feels like he's trying too hard. I don't think his movies are bad. I don't think that the two movies I've seen are bad. I still have to watch Maestro. But I can't help but walking out of that and feeling like everything felt forced, I guess. There's a very prevalent sad dad vibe to this movie, and kind of to A Star is Born as well. And if not sad dad, just sad man in general. And it's interesting, you watch Bradley Cooper's career and what he's doing, and all of his characters in these movies are creatives who are struggling with their relationships. And now I don't know anything about Bradley Cooper's life, but clearly he is a creative in real life, and you can't help but think that he's pulling from experience, I suppose. So is he going through something right now? It's if that's all I guess you write what you know, right? And if that's all you know, then you're kind of landlocked. I would love to see Bradley Cooper do something that is not in the same vein as these movies about a great artist who's misunderstood, or a man who is creatively stuck and is at ends with his creativity and his relationships. It just feels maybe just a little one-dimensional, and it feels like maybe he's trying to be taken seriously. I guess, as a director. I mean, I suppose you think Bradley Cooper, you think the Hangover series, Wedding Crashers. These are the things I think about. Is he just trying to break out of that mold? I don't know. I don't think that he's bad at what he does. I don't even think the flavor's not for me, although I didn't necessarily connect to this movie in general, but I'm also not middle-aged and divorced with children. So I can't hold that against it. But I would love to see him do something different. I'm going to move on. On a more exciting and more entertaining note, I would love to talk about 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. This is the fourth installment in the 28X Later franchise, second installment in the 28 Years Later trilogy, and by far one of the most entertaining movies I've seen in quite some time. So this story is still written by Alex Garland, who wrote all of the 28X Later movies. Instead of being directed by Danny Boyle this time, though, it's directed by Nia DaCosta. Nia DaCosta doesn't have a very deep bench. However, she's done her directorial debut. Her feature directorial debut is a movie called Little Woods, which admittedly I've never heard of. Appears to feature Tessa Thompson and Lily James. She then goes to head the 2021 Candyman remake. Admittedly, I don't know anything about the Candyman franchise, but I know I watched this movie on a whim and I did not think it was very good at all. I don't remember much. It was 5 years ago, but I was pretty underwhelmed with this going into it, understanding that it was a kind of, I don't know if beloved is a word, but like a well-known horror series or franchise or just a remake of a well-known horror movie. She also directed The Marvels, which is the sequel to Captain Marvel, one of our many like Phase 5 MCU movies. I didn't catch that one. I also didn't hear very good things about it. And in 2025, she did a movie called Hedda, which I believe she reunites with like Tessa Thompson and some of her regulars in that movie. So I really don't know the inner workings of what's going on with the 28 Years Later trilogy, but we know that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland reunited for 28 Years Later. Danny Boyle directed the original 28 Days Later movie. Alex Garland wrote. We move forward to 28 Years Later. They reconvene, and 28 Years Later drops mid 2025. It's about 6 months ago, I want to say, from time of this recording. And that movie seems very divisive, very polarizing. I think you have some diehard 28 days and weeks later fans that were expecting, I guess, one of two things: either like a deep, dark, gloomy character study set in this post-apocalyptic world, or an epic action movie where the military is just gunning down zombies and maybe you follow a small group of people as they work their way through, Walking Dead style. 28 Years Later was neither of those things fully. We did follow the young Spike, who was on a journey to get his mother better due to her illness. Spoilers for a 6-month-old movie. So 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple comes out only 6 months later. Directed by Nia DaCosta, still written by Alex Garland. I believe he wrote all three of them kind of as one standalone story. And my presumption is that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are busy at work on the final installment of this trilogy. I know a fair amount of people who did not love 28 Years Later. I don't know if it was unrelatable. I don't know if the story wasn't good, wasn't entertaining, were the performances bad. I had a good enough time during 28 Years Later. I did feel like some of the themes were maybe a little heavy-handed, especially with the visuals, but I had a really good time, and it's far and away the most watchable of the 28 Later franchise, in my opinion. I watched 28 Days Later not too long ago, and I think everyone knows that movie is just harrowing to watch. It was shot on like a 240p Sony Handycam or something, like the first digital camera that ever existed. It's a task just to watch that movie. And 28 Weeks Later is just a fun romp through the zombie apocalypse, essentially. Let's talk about The Bone Temple, though. The Bone Temple picks up essentially immediately after the events of 28 Years Later. Let me read the synopsis here. As Spike is inducted into Jimmy Crystal's gang on the mainland, Dr. Kelson makes a discovery that could alter the world. Short, sweet, and to the point. I think this movie is the perfect second movie of a trilogy, because 28 years later had to spend a fair amount of time, not necessarily world building because the world had already existed, but it had to introduce us to new characters, had to introduce some stakes, had to introduce some new, I guess, mechanics, if you will, in the 28 years later world. And because the Bone Temple is the second movie in the trilogy, we don't have to worry about introducing any new characters. We don't have to worry about wrapping up the plot of the trilogy. So we are truly, truly available to just do anything and everything that we need to get butts and seats to watch this movie. And by God, they did. So we were introduced to the Jimmy character in the prologue of 28 years later, and we kind of saw his backstory. We don't see him again until the final scene of 28 years later, which was admittedly a major turnoff for me because I didn't understand what the fuck was happening, but I get it now. And it was the perfect transition into the Bone Temple. At the end of 28 years later, there's like this absolutely outrageous, wacky Power Rangers zombie fight sequence with a grown-up Jimmy and all of his cohorts, who are also named Jimmy, as they save Spike from a horde of zombies. Once they save him, they take him in, and that is immediately where the Bone Temple begins. So in the Bone Temple, Spike is inducted into Jimmy's clan, gang, the Jimmy gang. He's inducted by trial by death, if you will. He accidentally kills one of the other Jimmys that was picking on him by severing his femoral artery, stabbing him with a relatively small knife in his thigh. And that Jimmy just bleeds out, and therefore Spike is now the new Jimmy. This movie pulls no punches and is horrifying, gruesome, brutal, and pure entertainment. I suppose I could understand it's not quite on the level of like torture porn gore for people who are queasy, but there are some pretty difficult to watch scenes. And when you're not watching these scenes, you're with Ray Fiennes' character, Dr. Kelson, who is essentially trying to figure out a cure for the rage virus. One thing leads to another, and the Jimmys come across Dr. Kelson's Bone Temple. We know Spike has been there before. He was there in the first movie. And when the Jimmys get to the Bone Temple, from that point on, might be some of the most exhilarating cinema I've seen in quite some time. This is not something that I want to spoil for anyone. I just want to tell you to go watch this movie. And if you're lucky, during the time of this recording, January 25th, it's probably still available in some theaters. I know a few people who despised might be a strong word, but did not like 28 years later. And I still went to them and said, your mileage may vary on 28 years later, but I promise you will have a good time at this movie. This movie rocks. It's far and away the best film of 2026 so far. And it's crazy that it came out in January amidst movies like Mercy, the upcoming Chris Pratt vehicle. This movie was awesome, and you need to go see it. And I know a few people who have also said that they want to wait until the final movie of the trilogy comes out and they want to watch all three of them. That's a completely fair assumption. However, I will say, if anything in this movie is spoiled for you, that's going to be really upsetting. That's going to be very upsetting. Anyway, there's not much else to talk about this week. These are the movies that I'm starting to see in 2026. I will say the last thing that I'm not going to talk in depth about, but I do want to bring up, is 2026 is the 25th anniversary of specifically the release of Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring. So starting last weekend, theaters were rescreening the extended editions of The Lord of the Rings. I was lucky enough to grab some tickets to the local theater because they were going fast. Caught Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King on Friday, Saturday, Sunday of last weekend. And I know that screenings were still going on and still being not sold out, but still selling tickets throughout the week this week. I also know financially that they're doing fantastic, like as always, for being a 25-year-old movie. I'm really curious to see if they just double and triple down. I suppose this is Warner Brothers making these decisions. I'm really curious to see if they double and triple down on next year and the following year being the 25th anniversary of the release of the Two Towers and then the 25th anniversary of the release of Return of the King. I'd say on average, I probably watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy every year anyway. So if for this year and the next 2 years, I can get the extended editions in theaters, I'm not necessarily complaining. I am complaining a little bit because these tickets are excluded from my AMC A-list membership, so I have to pay for the tickets, but that's okay. My only wish is that they would be screened in some kind of premium format. That would be fantastic. But as of now, it's just extended editions in a regular theater. But that's okay. You know, and actually, Peter Jackson has said this. He said this, he had a little talking head interview in front of each of the movies this past weekend. And he brings up a great point that a lot of fans of the movies may have never had the opportunity to see them in theaters. I believe I was one of them. I remember watching Fellowship in the theater when it came out in 2001. I don't know if I ever finished the trilogy in theaters, though. I wasn't necessarily committed. I was just taken there because it was a movie to see, and I was a loud, annoying child. Anyway, a lot of these fans have never been able to see these movies in theaters, and especially not the extended editions. I think this is only the second time that they've released the extended editions in theaters, because they're long. I think the Fellowship of the Ring clocks in at 3.5 hours. Two Towers is just shy or just over 4, and Return of the King is 4.5 hours. Like, these are commitments, and there are no breaks, no intermissions, no nothing. So I did catch those last weekend, and I will probably continue to catch those at movie theaters for as long as I live. Anyway, there's still a couple more movies to catch up on. As I slowly work my way through the backlog, I'm hoping to start to only cover really one movie per episode so we can dive deeper into it. And like I said, I might talk about some of the other movies that I'm watching that week as well. And they may or may not have anything to do with the new release. And if they don't, maybe there's still some kind of through line. That's the kind of fun I like to have with movies. It's great to watch a movie like Midnight Run and then watch one battle after another. And then in addition to that, it's great to hear that Paul Thomas Anderson reaches out to Matt Damon in the midst of making one battle after another and asks him if he has a reel of Midnight Run available for him to watch and reference while he's making the movie. That's such a good time, you know? Again, art, and so on and so forth. I love finding these connections that filmmakers use, you know? But anyway, I guess that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for listening.